button, and then we'll get started. Cool. So hey everyone. Today we have Cheryl. Cheryl is a senior PM at Roblox working in the safety space. She has a ton of years experience being a PM at a ton of different companies, such as PlayStation, Google, and she's been able to focus on this space in terms of safety and keeping you guys safe online on the products that she's worked with. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Cheryl now. I'm going to drop her LinkedIn in the chat, but yeah, Cheryl, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Vasant. All right, everyone, nice to meet you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you for being here. And in today's talk, I wanted to talk to you about what is this trust and safety field that I'm sure you have kept hearing about, and what does that mean for you as a product manager and in the ways you think about building products. And so just a quick background about myself. I'm currently a product manager at Roblox. It's a social gaming platform that is currently mostly focused on children, but we're also expanding to other users like adults as well. And the domain I've worked a lot in my career is in trust and safety, and that encompasses a lot of different things. There's many vectors that we're going to deep dive into. So the first one is security, making sure you're not hacked. Privacy, to make sure your data is safe. For example, content safety, to make sure what you're seeing on Facebook is there's no extreme violence on it. And I've worked in a variety of companies in product management, program management, analytics. So if you are trying to pivot your career as well, feel free to reach out to me. So this is the agenda. As I said, we're going to go through a history of what the trust and safety field looks like. We're going to talk about the different problems there is to solve and how do you solve it. A framework for how you should proactively build products by design. And also we're going to go through a fun example of how you actually do that in practice. And so first, as I said, we're going to go through history of trust and safety, how it has been in the physical world to the digital. So first, you see the screen. I'm trying to illustrate the evolution of this trust and safety kind of problems in society. Right here, I'm highlighting the fake news problem. So in the first image you see in the 1800s, you may know this from history lessons about Jack the Ripper in the UK. This person is a murderer who murdered a lot of women in the UK. But what a lot of newspaper publishers did was exploit that by kind of sensationalizing and creating articles of more murders that happened, even though Jack the Ripper didn't do that, and they got arrested for that. But that is and also probably earlier on in history, those were the instances of where fake news came in, where newspaper publishers were trying to create more clickbait in order to sell more news in newspapers. In the middle, you see magazine tabloids. So that's existed in 1900s until now, where you go to the grocery aisle, you see a lot of these magazines about kind of celebrity gossip. And it may not be true, whatever they're saying, Kate Middleton being named queen, but they say that in order for you to buy that magazine. And then you also fast forward to now in recent times. So for example, in this image for Pizzagate, it was in 2016 where some members of the Democratic Party were accused of working jointly with some pizza shop in like having some sort of child sexual abuse ring or something like that. And this was fake news on Facebook, and a lot of some users were really like angered by this, and they actually came to the pizza shop to kind of confront these pizza shop owners with an armed confrontation. And so in this kind of evolution, I want to show you that like trust and safety problems always existed in the physical world and also in the digital. Only now the problems and like the magnitude of impact has really 10x'd, just because this kind of news can reach a global audience, and the consequences can be severe, as you see here, that someone would really bring a gun to a physical space to threaten someone just because of something they saw on in Facebook. Another example of the history of this is that theft also happens. So in the physical world, you are just a local robber trying to rob like a local bank. But now these bad actors could go multiple routes. They could go on multiple sites. Like for example, we see this Bill Gates example. They could compromise Bill Gates' Twitter account and try to get money sent to them, or they could just steal users' credentials and try to get their money via their bank account or via social media or whatever it is. And there's just so many more victims involved, and there's so many ways for you to steal someone's money than you did before in the physical world. So really, the number one goal of like all this bad activity that can happen on platforms, it's always profit or power, right? You're trying to steal someone's money, you're trying to sensationalize news so that you sell more copies. And lastly, in this kind of history, the enforcers of these rules also change. So how do we as a society kind of mitigate these safety problems to make sure that theft doesn't happen or kind of fake news don't happen? In the physical world, you have citizens reporting a crime if they see it on the street. You have laws and policies that lawmakers create in order to kind of make sure there's a law-abiding society. And you also have law enforcement so cops that are assigned to a certain district or region for them to kind of enforce rules and arrest people that they see are suspicious. Going to the digital world, that's very different. It's not that the physical world still exists, but the digital world, there's more complexity here. The people enforcing these rules are employees of tech companies. So trust and safety teams within these tech companies and content reviewers. These people, small amount of employees, are tasked with enforcing the rules to protect these billions of people on the internet. And so now that I've given some history of the different problems that happen throughout history and also the ways in which they're enforced, I'm going to talk a bit more about like the problems to solve within trust and safety. So first, just to make sure we're understanding the parallels of physical and digital, I've already highlighted the fact that the physical world is very local, the digital world very global in ways that it's billions of users. The scale is huge, is more complex because users can be very faceless and anonymous, and therefore it's hard to tell sometimes whether they have done something wrong. Like if you're a cop, you see someone punch someone else, you know for sure that like you should punish them, but it's not as cut and dry in the digital world. So how do we approach these problems? There's two ways. You could either approach them reactively, where you're trying to solve problems when they come up, like a whack-a-mole, or you can do it proactively. You try to get ahead of the problem, anticipate it, and try to mitigate it before it actually becomes a problem. So in a digital world or physical, reactive approach would mean you're relying on citizens to report the crime. Very similar in like the tech platform world where you're relying on users to file reports. So for example, a user sees like a extremely violent YouTube video, they report that. And you rely on them to report that for YouTube to take it down. What does a proactive approach look like? For the physical world, it means you are setting laws and policies to make sure like there's citizens are not punching each other. You put more cops out on the street when you know that it's a high crime area to make sure they can get ahead of it when things are happening or when you anticipate that it could happen. Very similar case digitally, where you are in a tech company, you're creating policies of what's allowed and what's not. And you're being very clear with your users about those policies. And you're also proactively scanning for that abuse. So for example, for that extreme violent YouTube video example, the companies can be scanning for this type of bad content and trying to take it down proactively. So with that said, what are the specific problems to solve in trust and safety? So I guess let's talk about the ultimate goal, right? The ultimate goal, just like the physical world, we want a functioning, like a rule-abiding society. So we want to make sure we have a like orderly online society that protects users from harm. And that's very hard, as I said, because users can be very anonymous. It's faceless, and they can hide behind the screen. And it's not black and white. It's not like someone punching someone else. It's for example, someone saying something that is on the edge of being offensive. So is it really offensive or not? Is it really causing harm? And so with that said, I'm going to talk a bit about the 5 different problems that we usually solve in trust and safety. These are probably not exhaustive, but these are generally what companies will have these teams. So the first one is that the first harm we want to protect users from is having their accounts hacked. So this would be in the scope of an account security team. So for example, your Facebook account can get hacked. An attacker can rely on your social graph because you have friends and, send your friends some spam or some message telling them to send them money. So they can, compromise your account and do something worse with it. The second thing is having money stolen, and that's usually in the scope of a payment fraud team. So this could be stealing your money in a bank account or knowing your credit card number and putting some fraudulent charges on it. The third one is about protecting users from seeing egregious content. So that's usually the scope of a content safety team. So this could be like an extremely violent video, it could be like a pornographic picture, or it could be something like a spam review on Yelp or on Google Maps. The fourth one is about protecting users from being harassed or bullied. And that's usually in scope for some team like a user safety team. So in that context, you're trying to protect users from like seeing offensive comments or chats. And the last one is about your data privacy. So making sure the data that you provide into a platform are not used for nefarious purposes. So that's usually the scope of the data privacy team. And an example of that is in the Uber app could be asking for too much information about you as a user and could perform functions for you. So for example, they could, if you give them permission, they could see or delete or modify all your emails if you consent to giving that to them. And that could be very risky if they are using your data for purposes that you don't want them to. So as you can see here, there's lots of different harms that can be done. And as a product manager in this space, you're thinking about the problems to solve, but you're also thinking about the different types of users that you're solving it for. So for example, yes, you're definitely solving it for the good end user and you're trying to protect them, but you're also targeting these adversarial actors. So it's these end users could be, these bad actors could be someone in a black hoodie in a basement. They're like a bad guy. But it could also be companies, right? There are companies that could be downloading your data and have too much access, etc. So we also take like a user-based approach in determining how to solve these problems as well. So I talked a bit about the types of problems you'll see. Now let's talk about how do you actually solve these, how do you usually solve these problems at scale? So the first two I'll highlight is, first one is about being hacked and having your money stolen. They use the same strategies to solve that problem, so I kind of combined them together. So in order to protect your account from being hacked and have your money stolen, usually you follow 3 different strategies. You, one, try to detect these anomalies. So for example, you usually log into your account from Virginia, but now you're logging in from Vietnam and a lot of money is being transferred out of your account, then that's usually something suspicious. And that's something that a company would try to flag for human review or have their systems kind of block that transaction. Second one is you would try to prevent it from happening by putting some friction. So before you to be able to prevent, you need to detect that there's something sketchy happening, and you may prevent that via you may use two-step verification on a platform, and you have to prove that you have the phone or you have the authenticator app in order for you to log into an account. So that's an example of what prevention means. And a third one is about mitigation. So once the bad incident happens, so a user gets hacked, a user gets money stolen, for a company, what's the best customer service we can provide for the user in order to restore their account to the original state? Okay, so moving on to the second one, seeing egregious content. What does that look like? It's for this one and the two other problems we're going to deep dive into. It's unlike the getting hacked and having money stolen case, is not as black and white. When you have your account hacked or money stolen, the bad actor in sight is like the bad guy, and it's very black and white that they're doing something bad. However, for this seeing egregious content case is not as cut and dry, because any user can post some bad content and may not know it, or may not care. So it's not just it's someone in the black hoodie perpetrating this type of safety issue. So there's going to be a lot of edge cases. So therefore, you need to take a little different approach in approaching this problem. So the first one is you want to set some policies. You want to make sure that good users know what is allowed and what's not allowed, so that they don't unknowingly post some content that is egregious. You second, again, you want to detect. You want to have some rules or machine learning or whatever it is, or fact checking, to make sure that you as a company are flagging any potentially egregious content to review before it gets posted. And lastly, if a piece of content violates our policy, then you take it down. So you either, depending on how bad the violation is, you want to warn the user, you want to ban their account, or you want to take down their content. So moving on to being harassed and bullied. For this problem, again, it's not as black and white. Anyone can harass and bully anyone. It's not just a bad actor, someone in a black hoodie. So you still also need policy to delineate what is acceptable and not acceptable ways of communicating on your platform. You need to detect. Detection means, based on rules, machine learning, user reports. The third one is interesting, driving behavior change. Something that companies have recently been doing more of is how do we change people's behaviors to be a better human being on the platform? So for example, I'll give an example of an Instagram feature, is that when you try to post something on someone's picture and they can flag that it's like a very offensive comment, they would, when you try to post it, they'll nudge you. They'll say, is this really something you want to post? This is not like the nicest message, and something about be kind to each other or whatever it is. So it's interesting to see that companies are exploring ways for trying to nudge you to become better and not to bully or harass other people. And the last one is, of course, worst case scenarios, you ban someone, you kind of warn them, you hide their comment or whatever. And for the last problem here, it's about data being used for nefarious purposes. Again, not a black and white problem, because really bad actors and also legitimate companies may not know the rules, or if they know the rules, they may stretch the rules to kind of bend to their business model. And so here you also need policy to be able to define what is acceptable, what is not. You need to educate them on that. You may want to verify these companies or developers who are trying to get access to this data because it's highly sensitive, and you want to vet that they're legit. And the last thing you may want to do here is to make sure that you're being transparent with your users. So as I said, the way you solve problems in trust and safety is still very user-based. So there is like the bad actor, but there's also still this good user. So for this good user, for user transparency is you want them to make the right choices about how they should be sharing their data and have them make informed choices. So you want to give them enough information for them to decide for themselves whether they want to share the piece of data about themselves. So for example, a piece of data could be your email, your whole email access to an Uber app, or it could be your entire contact list or your location. So these are very sensitive user data, and you want users to make the right choices here. Okay, so on to what can go wrong when you're going through a product launch with all this in mind, with the problems in mind, how to solve it. Usually, what happens is trust and safety concerns of how features can be abused and how bad actors can harm other users is viewed as like a 1% problem. That it's not something that happens very often, and therefore it's not focused on by a company to solve it. Because it appears that the ROI is not there, and it's more important to kind of grow the platform, grow the users, and grow the number of users to use whatever feature you're trying to launch. So trust and safety problems are usually addressed as an afterthought after a PR incident happens. And that has been the case like in the last 5 to 10 years, but that's been changing lately. So for example, but it's changing lately, but it's still definitely spurred by PR incidents. So for example, 2 examples here is one is fake news. In 2016, it's been claimed that fake news on Facebook has swung elections, etc. And that kind of led Facebook and all these companies to make sure that they have fact checking and all these other mechanisms to make sure that fake news does not spread as widely in order to swing an election, for example, with that impact. Another incident that has happened is, I believe in 2018, there was scandal about Cambridge Analytica, which was a company in the UK who apparently was accused of creating profiles of millions or billions of Facebook users in order to use it to kind of serve them political ads to swing their decision to vote for someone in particular in an election in the US. And in this case too, that also spurred a lot of concern in the community and for lawmakers in order to change the rules of how data should be accessed on platforms. So that spurred a lot of making sure that we have data privacy baked in features to make sure user data is protected. And so, as I said, in recent years, companies are becoming more proactive to address these problems before they happen. And how do we do that? That's what we're going to talk about a little more here, is you want to build products by design, and you want to stress test the different scenarios different kind of risky scenarios that can happen. So we can prioritize to find solutions around this and prioritize whatever solution needs to happen before launch or after launch, etc. So now I'm going to go through a building products safe by design framework, and then we're going to go into a fun example of what that actually means and how do we apply it. So this framework, pretty simple. There's 4 different steps to this. First one is we should make sure that whatever product we're trying to design. So it could be we're in a team, we're trying to launch like a payment feature on social media, or you and your company is trying to launch an entire new app. So it could be, let's just say like an Airbnb app where you're trying to have homeowners opening their doors to strangers for them to stay in for a few nights. Whatever the product or feature is, you would still go through the same thought process here. So number 1, product goal, pretty simple. Understand the problem you're solving and what that imagined future would look like when what you launch is successful. The second thing here is to go through a risk assessment of what are all the things that can go wrong when you launch this feature. So for example, if you're trying to launch a payments feature on social media, something that can go wrong is you're going to have a lot of bad actors maybe creating or maybe hacking into people's accounts. And because you have friends on your accounts, the bad actor is gonna, on your account, ask your friend to send them money. And your friend's gonna do it because they think it's you. So you need to think about all these different risks and kind of penetration test it to make sure that you understand all the different things that could happen on the platform and how likely. And that goes to my next point, is that with limited resources and capacity, we'll need to prioritize what problems we address first and what is not that important to address. So you would have some sort of criteria of you want to understand the likelihood that this problem will pop up, how many users will be impacted, what is the brand and reputation risks, the level of effort to implement a solution for this problem, etc. And then, as I said, you would prioritize based on ROI. With limited resources, you need to understand what is the cheapest thing you can do to mitigate this risk as much as possible. Third, you'll need to define the success metric and counter metric to this. So now that you kind of understand this problem more holistically for what does the success of the product look like and what are the things you can go wrong, you can better gauge what that metric should be and the counter metric to make sure you're not overly optimizing your product goal. So for example, what this means is you are creating a new platform and your goal might be to grow the number of users that are going to sign up on your platform. However, if you don't really think about the different risks, you may think, 50% sign up, 50% increase in sign up is great, and we're really successful. However, you are not if most of them are like bots or fake accounts that don't add value to your platform. So that's the thing about success metrics and counter, that success, you may want to optimize your sign up, but the counter metric here is you want to make sure that 99% of people who sign up are not bots, so that you are kind of having a balance of these and are actually able to clearly frame your what success is for your product. The last thing here is about a risk mitigation plan. So now that you've understood the goal, you know the different risks that could happen, you've prioritized it, you know what success and counter is, it's time for you to come up with a plan. So the plan on what exactly are these solutions and when are you going to do them? Are you going to do them before launch because they're that important that your launch will go wrong if you didn't do that? You'll do it like during or post-launch because they're not as important. They could happen, but it may be something that happens down the line. So you would do that here to come up with that roadmap of how you would address these risks and which ones you are clearly going to address and which ones you're not. Okay, so I've gone through this framework. Now we can go through an example. An example of this is, let's talk about how we would build an online dating platform. So first, on this online dating platform, like many others, the product goal is pretty simple. It's like, how do you build connections between people who otherwise wouldn't have met in real life? And then you go to step 2, which is, what are the different risks that can happen for this product? So there could be a few, there's probably a lot more. But to start here, it is number 1, people can be creating lots of fake accounts just because they feel like it, or just because they could profit, or they're trying to catfish people into giving them money or something like that. The second one is they could be bullying other people just because they're kind of mean people, and that could happen because the dating platform would enable one-on-one chat. The third thing that could happen is some sort of egregious content can be posted. So for example, this could be a picture or a video that's really inappropriate that you don't want on the platform, that is getting sent around with the different matches you may have as a user. The fourth one is about meeting dangerous people offline. So you match with people, you meet them in person, and they may be a murderer or whatever it is. And you definitely don't want that happen in an online dating platform. And the last one is fake news. It could happen if you know your match is like a conspiracy theorist or whatever it is, and is sharing information with you that is fake news, or they put it in like their profile. So, okay, now that we know the product goal and a different risk that could happen, um, how do we prioritize this? So I did a quick prioritization here of the things that could happen. I can highlight first of what I thought were P0. So in the places I've worked, I use this priority framework of P0, P1, P2. P0 means is the most important. P2 means is least important. So that's what that language means. So what is P0 to solve? For you to launch this online dating platform off the ground, you need to make sure that you have the least fake accounts you have, because you're trying to grow this platform. You're trying to grow organic connection between people. You really don't want this platform to be low quality profiles and people who's trying to take advantage of these real people who are trying to find connections. So when you launch this platform, this fake account thing is a P0 problem. The second P0 problem here is, for this online dating platform, the goal is for you to meet someone and then meet them in real life. So the other P0 problem is definitely to make sure you're not meeting dangerous people offline and something bad happens to you. For the P1 problems, one, bullying, harassment, that could happen, but that's always going to happen. Definitely it's something we should do about it. But if we have limited time and resources, it may not be the first thing. If we are able to, if we can come up with something that, for example, users can report the other user, there's some low-hanging fruits, we can at least have some protection for users here. The second P1 is egress content being shared. Similar to the first one, it definitely will happen, but there may be some low-hanging fruits that we can do here to kind of at least address this problem partially. And it's not something that is super critical for launch, because launch is more about, when you want to launch something like this, it's more about are people signing up, and are they actually starting those first conversations or getting matches or whatever on the platform. The last one I prioritized here is fake news. So essentially, a online dating platform is usually one that you're not really getting your news sources from. And it could happen because other people could post some fake news to you in a message. However, those people that post that to you, probably you as a user don't see them as very super trustworthy. And therefore, fake news, unlike other platforms like Facebook or Twitter, it's not going to be as important of a consideration as a trust and safety problem here. So third, what does product success and countermetric look like now that we understand the goal and kind of the bad things that can go wrong? As I said, we want to make sure that we're not optimizing too much for the success metric and kind of over optimizing and not regarding the different risks for the success. So for example, the success here is that we want to increase the percent of weekly active users, because we want to make sure we get signups, but we also want to make sure that we retain them as users that come back. And what's the counter? It's if you just stopped at success, weekly active users, then you'll account for, you don't kind of deep dive and know more about who are these users. Are these users fake accounts? Are these users people who are harassing each other? You don't want those kind of users on your platform, and you want to minimize that behavior. So as a counter metric, you would want to measure something like this. You want to measure minimize the number or percentage of fake or abusive accounts on the platform as you are optimizing your weekly active users. So, okay, and lastly, now that we understand the goal, the risk assessment, and the metrics, how do we actually put a plan together to solve for this for us to launch the online dating platform? So here's how I kind of prioritize the different kind of features into different phases. So for pre-launch, I think the most important problems to address is the fake account problem, because that really hurts the adoption and kind of the getting off the ground the fact that we want users to create meaningful connection with other people, plus offline safety, because as with any platforms like this, you really need to make sure that people are not going to get themselves in dangerous situations. So there's some ways to solve for this. I've noted 4 here. One is make sure that you are maybe forcing people to sign with Facebook. So what does that mean? Actually, a lot of online dating platforms do this, because if you have a Facebook profile, they can then ask you, they can then understand the number of friends you have, whether you've chatted with other people, etc. Essentially, it's a way for them to kind of proxy your real world identity. So they have some sense that you have a social graph, you're not a fake account, and perhaps they can't tell whether you're dangerous or not, but at least they can tell that you are a real person with friends and with photos, etc. The second thing that you could do is real ID verification. So essentially, this is also about addressing the fake account problem to make sure you're a real person tied to that one account. But the other big consideration here is they could run a background check on you to make sure that you're not like an offender, a criminal offender person, by running that to make sure that if they accept you to the platform, you're a law-abiding citizen. The third thing you want to do for pre-launch is a user reporting flow. So, for example, we said that I said that we should address like the bullying, harassment, and like the egregious content issues. Even if they don't pop up at launch, we should at least give some minimal protection for the user. So here it would mean making sure that users have some flow for them to report bad content, bad accounts, etc. Making sure they have ways to block another user or mute another user so that they have ways to protect themselves, even if we're not going to address that at first. The fourth thing here is about user education about offline safety. So pretty straightforward. We want to make sure users know they shouldn't just meet anyone offline and that there's risks, and give them some education of how they should go about that. Okay, so for post-launch phase 1, the second problem to tackle is how do you address content safety and bad behavior? Now that you kind of have cleaned up your sign up flow and that you know that people who sign up are not criminals and they are real people, how do you address the second level problem, which is this kind of content and bad behavior? So you could do some sort of rule-based or machine learning model to kind of find bad texts and content to make sure that humans are reviewing it. A model is kind of, for example, flagging when it's like a really bad image, then they'll ban it immediately. Or if it's an edge case and it's the model isn't sure, then you would have a human kind of make that determination of whether something is bad or not. And the third thing you would do, I would say you would address, is then you have like a very clean sign up. You have users making meaningful connections. You want to make sure that users can actually continue to make meaningful connections by making sure you're addressing any bad behavior, bullying, harassment, etc. So you may want to start to drive behavior change for people who behave badly. So what this means is there's definitely people who are going to be like permanently nasty people on the internet, and that those people are not who I'm talking about. Those people, perhaps what you want to do is ban them to make sure that they cannot just abuse other people. I'm talking about the people who, like contextually, perhaps they behave badly sometimes. They say some offensive things, but they're not like that like 100% of time, you may want to try to drive behavior change for them, for people who have hope and that you can make them better on the platform. So for example, this could be, for example, nudging people to, if you see that their comment or their message is kind of offensive, show them a pop-up or something saying that, hey, we don't tolerate nastiness and we want to have like a kind environment. And you kind of nudge them in the right direction to have good behavior, but you also make the consequences clear that if they continue with this abuse, you will be banned for X days or permanently or whatever. And so these are the ways that I would approach the roadmap wise for how to solve the different problems and how to prioritize the problems for this example. So what are the takeaways of this for me here is, number one, I think I've been in trust and safety for my entire career. I think it's super exciting. I'm glad that the industry is picking up on it. There's a lot more roles in trust and safety and a lot more people getting interested in it. So I think this space is very complex. It's challenging and requires a lot of novel ideas to solve. For example, deepfakes is something that has risen in the last few years. Deepfakes is something where if you kind of, you can kind of mimic for example, you can mimic someone's video, Obama or Trump or whoever it is, and you can have like a person pretending to be them, and it could look and feel and sound exactly like Trump or Obama or whoever it is you're trying to mimic. Those are hard problems. Like humans, it's hard for a human to detect what a deep fake looks like. And there's more and more of these novel things that bad actors are coming up with to try to fool the system, to try to fool humans, trying to protect users from. And so it requires a lot of thought and a lot of constant kind of understanding and research in order to understand how to solve these problems sometimes. The second thing to go here to understand here is to, even if you're not going to be a safety product manager, it's always good to understand what you should consider when a product can go south. It's good to always think about your contingency plans and what you plan to do when these things happen reactively, but it's also good to make sure you bake that into your kind of pre-launch plan. And the last piece is, as you probably know, usually companies and yourself have limited time and resources. So you should always prioritize your risks to solve by your return on investment. So you could look at the likelihood that problem is going to pop up, the number of users it's going to impact, the severity of that impact if it happens. So for example, it's really severe if someone meets someone else offline and gets hurt. And so therefore, that would be something that you may want to prioritize higher. So those are the three takeaways that I have for this talk. And now I'm happy to open up for questions.
Thank you so much for that, Cheryl. Like, I mean, this is one of the most informative like product buds events that I've been to. So it's really cool to see it. I think I definitely learned a lot, and I'll probably go through the PowerPoint before I start my new job. But now we're going to open it up for questions. So please raise your hand and we will call on you. And if you guys could turn your cameras on while you ask the questions, that would be awesome. But yeah, Amish, I'm going to, you can unmute and you can ask your question.
You're on mute.
Great. Thanks a lot for this talk. Again, really informative. And I wanted to ask you if you could just talk a little bit more about mitigation in the getting hacked use case. I want a few more examples if you don't mind.
Yeah. So mitigation there could be multiple things. So I guess just for context for everyone else, if you don't remember, your account can get hacked and your money can be stolen. And mitigation means that when your account is hacked or compromised, what can a company do as a mitigation approach? And so there's a few things you could do. One is like you could your account gets hacked, you yourself as a user don't know it. A company, a very non-elegant way, is to force password reset on your account. It could be sending you a security email like, hey, your account is hacked, please do something here. Another thing we could do is making sure that making sure that we're really clear what happened to your account. So for example, got hacked, these things got stolen, and we have restored them, right? Just to make sure the user understands that a company actually like did something to restore their account. But there may be trade-offs here where you may not want to give that much information to a user of what happened. You just want them to know that everything's okay. And so, yeah, I think it's more about like just making the user feel like they are safe. And also making sure you kind of give them a follow-up of what can they do to protect themselves from now on. So for example, perhaps you tell them, hey, your account is hacked for the future. Please turn on two-step verification or something. So like if they do, they're protecting themselves. So I think the mitigation here is something that we do on the back end, but it's also a lot about like, how do we communicate with the user? Because it's like a very traumatic time for them, right? If their Google account or whatever it is gets hacked, they should feel like we are there for them and we have steps that we're taking to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Amish, for your questions. Darsh, you are next. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yep. Thank you so much for the talk, Cheryl. That was pretty good, especially from a privacy standpoint. I feel this is something that a lot of us miss when we are applying for product management roles and thinking of getting into the industry, because we are like, oh, I want to think about product design, product sense. I want to think about estimation, and privacy is like often something that people don't readily think about.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you is like, as product managers, we often might end up working on products that are like super, I would say, relevant in the industry. Like there are a lot of competitive space. In those notion, how would you suggest a junior PM especially to innovate on products from a privacy standpoint? Like how can we innovate or get that edge or even think about those product innovations from a privacy standpoint, that hey, if we include this ABC feature for privacy, it gives us a competitive edge? Because I know like you shouldn't think about features directly, but I'm very confused. How do you even start thinking about it from a privacy standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what jumped to my head is like Apple, right? They really focus on privacy features and making sure like your phone or your email when you log in is super private. I think where the good place to start when you start thinking about that is what problem are you solving for the user, right? I always start there of like, what problems will the user have if you don't do these features? I guess you don't think about the features, but think about like, for this product, if you do not add any privacy mitigations, what bad things could happen? And you really go from there, and you kind of have examples from that in history of the different tech companies have gotten in trouble in the recent years. So you kind of start there to understand, okay, for privacy in the industry, these are the bad PR incidents that has happened. And so you start from there, and you can then understand, okay, for our users for our platform, these are the bad things we think would happen, and therefore we should really go down this path to solve it. And because a lot of users now in the recent years do really care about privacy, and you are solving a user need here by doing that. So I wouldn't say you kind of start from this solution here. It's still understanding the user, what they need, in order for you to innovate and think about what you should do for them in the privacy realm.
Okay, that's a good way to go about it. I had one more question, if you don't mind. And this is more like you can treat it as a case study, I suppose. So recently, I'm pretty sure like most of us on the call, and even you would have heard about the WhatsApp fiasco regarding privacy. Like pretty much stated that, hey, we are going to use your conversational data to power our ad platform so that we can show you more relevant ads. And there was a big pushback. Everybody was kind of like, oh, I'm going to stop using WhatsApp. But I feel like nobody actually did. And even if I feel for 1 week, people were shifting to Signal, and the Signal servers broke down because they couldn't handle the load. And like 2 months, 3 months down the line, everybody's using WhatsApp again. And it's the same thing. Like they are still going to use your conversational data. Like it's not like, I think they pushed it back by a month, but after that, nothing happened to it. So in those scenarios, even if users are aware about it, like it's just a habit they've made. Like how would you tackle such a situation if like you are, let's say, Telegram, or you are some other company that is a competitor of WhatsApp, but you can't really do much about it because users are going back to it, even though there is a privacy concern?
That's interesting because actually a lot of my friends stopped using WhatsApp. Like I don't use WhatsApp except for my parents because everyone else got off it. So I have a different experience here. But I think, yeah, like for entrenched products, it's always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard to steal users. But I think, like, for example, you said that they would Telegram or whatever couldn't handle the load, right? So make sure you're able to handle the load and being able to frame yourself as like a security first company is still a good thing to have. It doesn't mean you'll get all the users, but you'll get, you'll get the ones that you want who are security conscious. So I think it's always going to be hard for you to fight with like a entrenched product. And yeah, so it's being ready for it when they are trying to switch would be good here. Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense. Yep, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Cheryl, if you, I had a question. So this is kind of more of like a personal question, but I was wondering if you have had an experience where you had to maybe put out a fire or have to deal with some, sudden issue when it came to privacy or safety. How was that experience? And was there anything particular that you did different compared to your times when you have a little bit more time to think about the problems and so forth?
That's interesting because that happens to me a lot. Like the most recent one was 2 weeks ago. I can't deep dive into like actual details of what happened. I've definitely dealt with both like from the account hacked side of top users, but there's also the side of data privacy when kind of like when kind of the data privacy scandals for 2018 happened. And what I guess personally, I'm just calm under this pressure because I think in general, no one's dying here. And I know a lot of people, some people might, like jump to, okay, we need to do this immediately in the next like hour. For me, I think of, okay, no one, like the sky is not falling. So I'm not going to freak out about this. However, I am going to make sure that like my team and I take action swiftly. But before that, I'm going to make sure we put some structure into this. So what I usually do, pretty much like what I did here, is like, what is the problem we're solving and how bad is it? Like, is it like is it like a top users who have like millions of dollars in their accounts who got compromised? Is it like, and there may be only 2 of them, or is it like millions of users who have no money, right? So you kind of go through this prioritization exercise framework for you to figure out, okay, based on our information, this is like something we need to address in this week, or it's something that we can address this month. So your prioritization guides like how fast you move on it. And then you kind of agree on this with your team, with execs or whatever, and you and then you kind of go from there to solve that problem. But yeah, I always try to make sure I have a framework and be able to prioritize what to do and when to do it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Jason, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, Cheryl, for the insightful section. So I guess I kind of had a question about So in light of like increasing ransomware event in the recent year, I guess the most recent one having to stay in your life for gas 2 hours in a row. So I kind of curious about like in the leadership level or middle management level, is there increased awareness of importance of protection against ransomware event, and how that might have affect the overall product development process, and how the I guess the leadership team in some of the company are really thinking about how to deal with this kind of event down the road?
Okay, yeah, you're not just talking about ransomware, right? You're talking about in general these kind of safety issues.
Yeah, but the ransomware is probably the more recent one, but yeah, definitely in general.
Got it, got it. Yeah, so I can give you a personal example. So I'm currently at Roblox, and one of the biggest reasons, I've been in trust and safety for my whole career. One of the biggest reasons I joined this company is because they put trust and safety as #1 company priority. They don't just say that, they actually have hired and are continuing to hiring a lot of people in order to solve this problem. And they are, and we have like executive reviews and talk about it all the time to make sure we're aligned and we're mitigating. So I think personally, I think companies, especially mine, are a lot more aware that, hey, these problems are really bad. It affects, millions and billions of people. Especially with the recent PR incidents of the last few years, we can tell how bad the impact could be if we do not solve these problems, like fake news, like ransomware, like all these data breaches that happen. And so therefore, I don't think it's just in my company. A lot more companies are becoming more aware of these issues, and therefore are creating these trust and safety teams, and when they do have trust and safety teams, they're given a lot more voice to kind of be decision makers of what should happen, how should we mitigate, and they're also given the voice to kind of I wouldn't say stop, but like deliberate with the actual product team. So for example, maybe the social team wants to launch something. However, that is going to increase the safety vector by a lot. The trust and safety teams are kind of given more power to say, hey, we can't do this like this. We need to make sure we have mitigation before the launch. So to summarize, I think trust and safety is a field that people are more aware of, and management respects a lot more and understand the complexities more than they did 5 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that, Cheryl. If anyone does not have any other questions, we're right about on time here. So I want to thank everyone for coming out, and most importantly, I want to thank Cheryl for putting together such an informational event. And I think everyone learned something new today. Yeah.
Before we go, I'd love to ask Cheryl a question to you, and this might be useful for our viewers here as well. Like, how would you define like working as a product manager in Roblox? If you'd like to share your experience, that would be super helpful. I think everybody here knows what Roblox is and like the amazing stuff you guys are doing. So would love to hear like how is your experience working as a product manager there?
I really love it. It's in general, I think the culture is great. The people are really smart. What I really like is that it's a very transparent org. It's not so big yet that that you like. It's so bureaucratic. You still kind of get FaceTime with the CEO and other execs. You're given a lot of autonomy because there's a lot of shit to work on, and we move super fast, not so fast that we're like breaking things, but fast in such a way that we're consciously always experimenting to understand, like, are our assumptions correct? If they are, then we roll out our features. If they don't, then let's rework that and let's think about this and consider all the trade-offs before we do it. So I like that people really do a lot of critical thinking before launches, but not in such a way that paralyzes them. And yeah, so I think I would really recommend it to be a product manager at Roblox. Let me know if you have any more questions about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Guys, if you like this event, feel free to give a shout out to Cheryl on LinkedIn or post about her. Cheryl has been, I think this is the third or fourth time she's helping us out at Product Bits. So thank you so much, Cheryl, for this. Vasant, off to you.
Of course.
Yeah, if we don't have any more other questions, kind of want to close up the event. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Cheryl. Feel free to reach out to Cheryl guys on LinkedIn. Her LinkedIn is in the chat, and also I'm sure you can find her by searching as well. So feel free to stay connected with Product Buds events. We'll put on a lot more things like this, but thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thank you. Bye everyone.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.